All right, welcome to Standing for Truth. I am your host, Donnie, and I want to thank everybody for being here for tonight's important debate. I've got Jonathan from Word of the Wild YouTube channel and Dr. Kent Hovind, also known as Dr. Dino. I've got these gentlemen here to debate the topic, is there reasonable evidence for evolution? Everybody's favorite topic, and this debate will be one to remember, that's for sure. So tonight's format is going to be the usual, formal, semi-formal. We're going to have 12-minute opening statements. We will have Jonathan start us off there. Then we're going to have 8-minute uninterrupted rebuttals, then an open discussion. We're going to keep it free-flowing and organic, focusing on one topic at a time, keeping it as equally timed as possible. Then we're going to have 5-minute closing statements, and then this is where we get you guys in the audience involved. We're going to have an audience Q&A, so please make sure you're tagging me with your questions at Standing for Truth, and that way I don't miss them. So let's get right into it, though. Let's kind of get to know the debaters for tonight, break the ice before we jump into the opening statements. Why don't we start with you, Jonathan Finley, as this is your first time debating on this platform. Thank you so much for giving us your time, and just tell us a little bit about who you are and a little bit about your channel and even why you find this topic so important.
Hey, I appreciate being here. This is really fun. This is one of my very first debates I had. I had one on modern day debate on the flat earth. I had a flat earther on my channel a while back to debate them. And I'm just trying to get into the debate world because I feel like I have a unique approach to a lot of these issues, especially around theology and God stuff and stuff like that. But I was first, I'll give a little bit of my testimony. I was, raised in a Christian home growing up, and all my parents were awesome people. My dad was pastor. He's been a pastor for like 30 years. I'm associated with a lot of the higher up Calvary Chapel people, still good friends with all of them. I was a pastor for about 10 years doing youth stuff, music, all that graphic design and all that stuff. And then I eventually start, I remember one day I was praying and I asked the Lord to show me the truth, because I remember being very confused and frustrated by the Bible and not understanding it and being endlessly just stressed out about it. And I just prayed, Lord, show me the truth. Show me whatever you want from me, just show it to me. And it wasn't long after that that I ran into some people on YouTube that had a little bit different theologies than me. And I remember just being like crushed by it. Like, oh my gosh, I got to change my thing. And, you know, it was actually, the first thing was like a pre-trib, post-trib thing. And I changed my view on that. And I went like mid-trib or whatever it was. I don't even remember now. But, and then from then, I just started changing my views about things, and I kind of slipped down that slippery slope that they all warned me about, but I still slipped down it. And now I'm kind of, I don't even know what I identify as, but I still love the Bible. I read it a lot. I try not to, because I just get frustrated, but I love listening about it. I love learning about it. I'm a big fan of like the Bible Project, and in this time of my life, I'm looking for the most radical interpretations of the Bible. I'm looking for something that really changes the fundamental structures of whatever system we're in or the world. And, you know, so I stumbled into things like, you know, Genesis with the Bible Project. It's not like they're saying, the authors aren't trying to get you to believe that this is a literal thing. The author's trying to tell you this is a story about God's temple, which is the earth. Like other gods have their temples, but God has his temple, which is the whole earth. That's why it's inaugurated in a 7-day stretch. And, you know, instead of in the pagan gods' temples, they have altars that you worship. They have idols. In God's temple, all humanity is his idols, and we're to reflect his image. And there's things in there, you know, like that have implications of the environment
I
issues.
just wanted to jump in real quick. I just wanted to make sure you were of the understanding that this was just like introductory words.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Not the opening statement.
Okay.
I think it just hit me. I was like, wait a minute. I think you might think this is the opening statement. So,
oh, sorry. My bad.
Hey, no worries. Let's stop it there. You know, I think that's a good introduction. People know who you are, where to find you. I've got your channel link in the description box. So I appreciate that, Jonathan, and I appreciate you being here for tonight's important debate. So before we get into your opening statement, though, let's hand it over to Kent now for his introductory words. Dr. Dino, how you been? A little bit about you. What's going on over at Dow?
Well, thank you for having me. My name's Kent Hovind. I was raised in a home of engineers and teachers up in Illinois. Ended up becoming an ordained Baptist preacher in 1974. I taught high school science for 15 years, science and mathematics. Started a ministry called Creation Science Evangelism in 1989. Traveled all over the world speaking on science and the Bible, defending the Bible as being scientifically accurate. I believe the Bible is exactly correct as written. God preserved it. I believe even stronger than that in the King James. That's where it's preserved. So I defend the Bible against all comers. I think God made everything like he said he did in 6 days. And that people used to live to be 900 years old, like the Bible says. And the whole world's only about 6,000 years old. And dinosaurs lived with man. And we have a theme park, museum, and science center in Lenox, Alabama. Good luck finding that in population 35. Straight north of Pensacola. We have visitors from all over the world come see our dinosaur adventureland. Come on down.
All right, I appreciate that introduction there, Kent. So as I indicated earlier, the format for tonight is going to be, well, we're going to start off with 12-minute opening statements. So let's hand it back to you, Jonathan. You've got up to 12 minutes. Gentlemen, whatever you don't use in terms of the opening statements and the rebuttals, we'll just throw into the audience Q&A. So Jonathan, whenever you're ready, now this is your opening statement, and you've got 12 minutes.
Okay, now I know what I'm doing. Okay, so kind of where I was left off when I was cheating there. The interpretation that I grew up with was the Kent Hovind thing. I used to be a big Kent Hovind acolyte. You know, I listened to all of it. I never like bought the DVDs or whatever because it was all on YouTube. But the view that it had to be like, if you don't believe that it's a literal thing, that it literally happened, it just seemed to be kind of like a little weak. Like it doesn't really do anything for the world. But the view that, oh, like when I heard that this is trying to tell me that I am a part of the earth and that I'm supposed to be a God-bearing image in the world and that the whole world is his temple, these things really touched me and really affected me in a deep level. But then in the same stroke, it kind of showed me that it doesn't have to be a supernatural thing. It just has to be a worldview, a metaphorical substrate that I can apply to my life, and I can at the same time, kind of do the compromise thing and have science and all of it. I want to have my cake and eat it too. And I think I've done that. Um, when I was formulating my opening thing, I wanted to open with that. Okay, I love the Bible. I absolutely love it. It's one of my favorite things to talk about, and Jesus is never-endingly fascinating to me and inspiring, and I want the whole world to know the radical message that the Bible has to offer. And I don't think it's as small and as confined as like a literal interpretation. I think it's much more powerful than that. But then I also wanted to kind of go through some of the points, because I've been watching all these debates, and Kent opens up with pretty much the same thing every time. I think he starts with, nobody has ever seen an animal produce another animal, or whatever it is. And I mean, of course that's true, right? Of course that's true. But I mean, and then he also will say later in the debate, like, if it went into court, then nobody would, they wouldn't accept that kind of evidence, because you can't prove that fossils had children, and you can't prove that they have children that are different. But it's true that my children are different than me. So they are. I mean, that seems to be pretty rational. There are enough stars for everyone to own 11 trillion, and then all of them could fit in this singularity smaller than a dot on a page. I've heard this a lot, but I've also heard, I've listened to a lot of the flat earth debates, and they'll say crazy things like this too. Like, if you're at the equator and you're moving at a tangential speed of 1,000 miles an hour, I mean, it sounds crazy, right? I mean, I'm sitting here in this little camper trailer. I don't feel like I'm moving really fast. It sounds crazy, but just because it's hard to understand and sounds crazy doesn't mean it's not true, right? I mean, the same thing with the stars thing. I don't understand it, but the professionals understand it. Where did time and space come from? I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. But again, like, because there's a lot of things that, like, if a flat earther came to me and said, well, what makes gravity? I don't know, but a professional would know. There's still other things, like the simplest cell is more complicated than the space shuttle. And I get it. It just makes sense, right? Like, naturally, just impulsively, a lot of these things are like, well, of course, a simple cell is so complicated. But I think one of the things that convinced me, and I thought was a good kind of rhetorical evidence, was we can observe cells being created. They replicate. They're a natural phenomenon. Space shuttles, we can watch humans make them. So there's evidence that cells make themselves. They're a naturally occurring thing. Space shuttles, the evidence is that they can be made. And I was convinced by that. I know that it's not particularly convincing to a lot of people, but it's convincing to me. Nobody knows how a mixture of lifeless chemicals spontaneously organize themselves into the first living cells. Again, we don't know a lot of things. Like I said earlier, we don't know what makes gravity. We know it has something to do with mass and Higgs field and stuff. But that doesn't mean that the science is wrong, and it doesn't mean that we won't learn more, and it doesn't mean that the scientists don't know what they're talking about. And this is kind of the tact I'm going to be taking. It might be a little cheap, but it's all I got. Like, the flat Earth thing seems to me to be the same as the young Earth thing. It's things appeal to our human intuition very easily, right? Yeah, a cow can jump, but given enough time, it can jump over the moon. Well, of course, that's not true, but that's an analogy, and it's a little bit of a trick. It's like what the flat earthers say that's convincing is gravity can hold down the oceans, this vast, heavy oceans of the whole Earth, but then a butterfly can just float gently. It's not crushed to the ground under this massive weight of gravity. These things really appeal to our genuine, our just general intuitions, or natural human things, but that doesn't mean they're not that's the truth, right? It just means it's more complicated than I understand. It's more complicated than most of us understand, just like everything else. But we trust that the scientists know what they're doing, and we're just at their mercy. And I think, I won't go much further, but that's kind of be my tact tonight. Is I think that Christianity in general, and this God belief thing, I think it's got bigger fish to fry than the sciences and the people that trust the experts. I think they should go and do the Jesus thing. The thing that I've heard people say Jesus do. Talk, go and speak truth to the power. The people that are keeping the poor people poor, making the rich people rich. They're all this oppression happening all over the world, the environmental catastrophe. And we need to, rally around these things, the things that, Jesus wasn't doing the environmental thing, but he was looking out in a world corrupted by the religious powers, the powers that are oppressing the poor and the needy and the racism and all these things. We as Christians need to focus on those things. We need to really master those things. And all these other things, that's not our zone, right? I think the Bible is talking about bigger and better and more wonderful and important things than believing that these things literally happened. It has bigger implications. I think it's wholly anachronistic to impose a scientific mind on these ancient, wonderful books. I think it does them a disservice. It does them violence. And I think it doesn't help the world. And I think it might even be a trick from the devil, that these books, if you don't believe them literally, that's what you should do, is believe these things literally and not actually live them out into the world, a more radical implication. That's kind of what I feel like the Lord has brought me to a place. And I hope that other people can understand that and see that this is all in good faith. I want to see the church rally together and do great things in the world. And I don't think that this attack on the sciences is going to do us any good. And I'll concede my time there.
All right. I appreciate that opening statement, Jonathan. That's a few minutes there that we can throw into either the discussion portion, depending on how that's going, or the audience Q&A. So that being said, why don't we now hand it over to Dr. Dino. You have your 12-minute opening statement. Whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you so much, sir. Well, the title tonight is there reasonable evidence for evolution? My take on it is, well, it depends what you mean by evolution, depends what you mean by reasonable. Oh, hang on. 186, enter. Okay. Reasonable is having sound judgment, fair and sensible. Is it sound judgment to believe in evolution according to the rules of logic? Is it reasonable? Okay. Antonyms, the opposite of reasonable, is illogical, invalid, irrational, non-rational, nonsensical, etc. Okay. And when you're discussing evolution, as Jonathan said, I use the same thing every time because I'm right. Okay. I've said 2 + 2 is 4 for a long time. I'm going to keep saying it because it's right. Truth doesn't change. God made the world. I don't need to change that. He made the world, whether you like it or not. And animals produce after their kind, whether you like it or not. So, yes, I don't need to change as long as I'm right. Okay. There are 6 different meanings to this word evolution. There is cosmic evolution, chemical evolution, stellar evolution, the stars would have to form, organic evolution, life would have to start. Where was life? How did life begin? The universe came into existence 14 billion years ago. This is what they teach in the textbooks, which I have in that bookcase back there. Okay. It started like an infinitely dense point. I think this is extremely stupid for somebody to believe all the matter in the universe fit into a dot that was extremely dense point. You couldn't squeeze a cup of water into a dot smaller than a period on a page. I tell people, stop sticking your head in the sand. It's not reasonable to believe all the material in the universe fit in a dot. The Big Bang theory is not reasonable. And that's the first step of evolution. I apologize, we're in the middle of a thunderstorm if you hear banging on the metal roof with our church building here. Sorry about that. Okay. It says, as the earth cooled down, it became a hot rocky crust and it formed a hard rocky crust on the outside. Earth was a molten for a period of around 4.5 billion years. Oh, okay. Early Earth was a hot molten ball. This is what the kids have to face. 4.5 billion years ago, the Earth formed. This is, of course, not at all what the Bible says, and I think this is stupid what they're teaching here. How did the Earth form? by the Human Origin Project. How did the Earth form? Stop sticking your head in the sand. It's not reasonable to believe we came from a dot, and it's not reasonable to believe the oceans are billions of years old, and the Earth started off as a hot ball of rock. So, it says after things cooled down, simple organic molecules began to form under a blanket of hydrogen. Oh, okay. All evidence suggests the Earth was inhospitable for life for the first 700 million years because it was too hot. Origin of life on Earth. How did life get started? Yeah, that's part of evolution. How did life get started? Have they made life in the laboratory? Absolutely not. And if a bunch of scientists did make life, that wouldn't prove anything except it takes intelligence to make life. But so far, even all of our intelligent scientists can't do it. The simplest cell is more complicated than the space shuttle. Okay, one cell in your body, you got about 100 trillion of them, okay? I don't think it's reasonable to believe they happen by chance. Reasonable, having sound judgment, fair and sensible. I think you should stop sticking your head in the sand and admit it's not reasonable to say everything came from a dot of nothing exploding for no reason. It's not reasonable to believe life came into existence from non-living material. Let's all put our head in the sand together. That's what the atheists do. Oh, well, everybody agrees it happened that way. I don't care if everybody in the world agrees except Kent Hovind. I'm going to stick by the truth. It's not reasonable. You don't have to go to a fully accredited sand university either to figure that out, okay? Organic evolution. We'll talk about this some other time. So it's not reasonable to believe we came from soup. That's what evolution teaches. And Jonathan, I'm sad that you gave up a logical, literal belief in the Bible to believe something so illogical as to believe you came from soup, which came from a dot of nothing exploding. Even this guy said, I despise people who believe something without evidence. Yeah, there ought to be evidence for it. The Earth was a hot ball of molten rock. The hot molten ball cooled down and formed a rocky crust. 4.1 billion years ago, the crust cooled, creating a solid surface with a rocky terrain, and then clouds formed, and it rained on the rocks for millions of years and turned them into soup, and the soup came alive. We came from primordial soup. Primordial soup. This is what the books teach, and this is what frustrates me. This is not reasonable. It's not science. It's not common sense. It's not true. Now, I am not asking everybody to teach at taxpayer expense that God made the world in 6 days in the public schools. I think the public schools, if they should exist at all, should totally avoid the topic of origins. You can't teach either one without getting somebody upset, so avoid it. Just talk about science. Evolution's not part of science. If life arose in deep sea hydrothermal vents, life had to be created. Concentration of organic compounds in the prebiotic ocean. Yeah, we all came from the prebiotic soup. This is in textbook after textbook. It's taught. Have they made life in the laboratory? No. Stop sticking your head in the sand. So it's not reasonable to believe that part of evolution, the origin of life. Organic evolution is not reasonable. No matter how made up your mind is, it's not reasonable. The Bible says God created the heaven and the earth. And God created all the winged fowl after their kind. 20 times in the first 7 chapters, God said they would bring forth after their kind. I believe the Bible when it says God made man in his own image. And God saw everything he made, and it was very good. I believe that. Now, again, I'm not asking everybody to pay for that to be taught, so the burden of proof is not on me, which is why the title of the debate is there reasonable evidence for evolution? Absolutely not. The Bible says clearly that God breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Let's see. And we got a lot of, the Bible teaches this over and over. Let's see. Let me get to the one I wanted to get to here. One moment here. Got 18 different topics I'd like to cover. Here we go. Slide number 48. Alt-DV 48, enter. Intelligent people can locate clay in the earth, mine it, and shape it into millions of things. That's what the whole pottery industry is about. We've got huge layers of clay here in our gravel pit in Lenox, Alabama. It is perfectly reasonable to say that intelligent people can take clay out of the ground and shape it into things, like a coffee cup. Perfectly reasonable. I think intelligent people can locate iron ore in the earth and dig it out. We have a lot of iron ore here on our property at Dinosaur Adventureland. I think intelligent people can take the iron ore and smelt it down and make steel. And intelligent people can take the steel and roll it into sheets. Then they can stamp it into parts for your car. hood, fenders, doors, etc. Intelligent people, and some not so intelligent, can take all the parts and assemble it into a car. That does not prove that the iron ore can make a car by itself, nor can the clay make a coffee cup by itself. God can take dust out of the ground and make a man. That's what the Bible says. I believe that totally by faith. But that's also the only reasonable way we can explain it. The complexity of the human body is mind-boggling. You have all kinds of systems in your body. You have a vascular system, the heart, the veins and arteries and capillaries. It's incredible. You have a digestive system, a skeletal system, an endocrine system, a balance system, integumentary system. 1 square inch of skin on a human body is more complex than the city of Chicago. That's a poor example. More complex than... You have a respiratory system, a nervous system that is mind-boggling. The nervous system of one body is more complicated than the wiring system of the whole city of New Orleans. Each of these systems is mind-boggling in its complexity, but to make it more amazing, they all work together, and they can grow with the body. As the baby's born, all these systems have to grow to keep up with it and work together at the same time. And they can heal themselves when you get hurt. If you wish to believe it all happened by chance, believe whatever you'd like. But that's not reasonable. Evolution is a religion. Jonathan, you gave up a logical, reasonable religion for an illogical religion. Evolution is not reasonable. Evidence supporting evolution, biological evolution, there is no evidence. They talk about the fossil record. This frustrates me. There's no such thing as a fossil record. It was Darwin, above all others, who first marshaled convincing evidence for biological evolution. He did no such thing. There still to this day is no evidence for evolution. 1799, they started arranging the rocks and made up what's called today the geologic column. Perhaps the most persuasive fossil evidence for evolution is the consistency and sequence of fossils. Oh, really? They talk about all these different periods, the Devonian, etc. Scientists use index fossils to determine the age of the rock layers. Read that carefully. How do they tell the age of the layers? By the fossils they found in it. These index fossils is a big thing in the textbooks. You got to spend a lot of time learning all of them. Index fossils. Yes, the trilobite is an index fossil for the Cambrian era. Look, there is no geologic column. That's the Bible to the atheist, though. The geologic column does not exist anywhere in the world except the textbooks. If you take a jar of sand, gravel, mud, and rock, water, and shake it up, it'll separate into layers. We do it all the time. Here's a demo at Dinosaur Adventureland. Always same order, gravel, sand, clay. Never an exception. I'll do that on the tour with you guys tomorrow. Always happens that way. They tell the kids in school the top layer is younger. Stop, stop, stop. How can the top layer be younger? Where did it come from? Outer space? No. All the layers are the same age. The geologic column, does it exist? No. Now, it's a fact the Earth has many layers of sedimentary rock. That's a fact. I taught Earth science 15 years, traveled to all 50 states and 30-some countries, 37, I think. I've studied in the Grand Canyon, top, bottom. You know, when I flew down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon, it was the same date and age as it was when I was at the top. I didn't age, I aged a couple of minutes, but I didn't age millions of years. It's a fact the Earth has layers. It is not a fact that they formed slowly over millions of years. Creationist says these layers are nearly all of them from Noah's flood. But the atheists are always trying to erase that line. Geologic column is the Bible for the evolutionist.
1 minute.
It can only be found one place in the world, and that is in the textbooks. If it existed to be 100 miles thick, it does not exist. It's a lie. If there were a column of sediments, this book says, unfortunately, no such column exists. So before you talk about fossils, no fossil would count as evidence in a court of law. The geologic column doesn't exist anywhere. It's made up. It's fantasy land. That's their Bible, though. You watch them refer to it over and over. All this geology stuff is about the age of the layers is pure baloney. Tell them I said so. Thank you. Go ahead.
All right. I appreciate the opening statements from Jonathan and Dr. Dino. That concludes the opening statements, and now we're moving into the uninterrupted rebuttals. We've got 8 minutes for the rebuttals. Before I hand it over to Jonathan, Any after shows tonight, just tag me, let me know, and I will give them a shout out. Looks like we have one after show over on Logical Plausible Probables channel, and it is going to kick off as soon as this epic debate ends. So, Jonathan, let's hand it over to you, and you have 8 minutes for a rebuttal. Go ahead.
So again, like the thing, you couldn't squeeze this cup of water into a dot. Like I mean, I get it, right? It just makes sense, but you're portraying it in like a really, in the worst light possible, right? I mean, the flat Earth people do the same thing. Like you don't feel like you're moving 1,000 miles. Do you think you're on a spinning ball going around the universe a trillion billion miles an hour? I mean, it's the same kind of thing. Like you're making it sound crazy because it is kind of crazy, right? But doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means it's crazy, right? And I don't understand it, and again, it's not. I understand it's not. It feels like it's not reasonable to believe these things because it sounds crazy, but it seems to me to be ultimately it's just the most reasonable thing to trust the experts. I think to be consistent in any way, I trust them with everything else. I trust that the people building planes know what they're doing. I trust the people who do everything else know what they're doing. But, looking internally when I was a young earther, I just didn't trust them on that one thing. It seems to be inconsistent. This thing about they didn't make life in the lab or they did make life in the lab, that's one of those things like, I don't even know why we would offer up any evidence like that. Because if you say, well, show me if they can make life in the lab. And then maybe they do, and then you go, oh, well, then that just proves that it takes intelligence. You just kind of move the goalpost, right? I don't know why that even comes up because nothing would be convincing. The Sand University thing, I like that. That's funny. That's new. That's new material coming from your boy Ken Hovind right there. He's evolving, adapting. We came from soup. I mean, the Bible says that we came from dirt. I like that. I mean, I like that a lot. I mean, Adama, I want to get a tattoo right here that says Adama in Hebrew because it means from the earth. Adama means from the earth. I love it. It's beautiful. I mean, the Bible is awesome. We're a part of the earth. We're a creature on God's earth, right? When he says it's not science, that just reminds me again of the flat earthers. They think that gravity is not science. And they want to redefine science. They say that if you don't, if you can't isolate the variable, then it's not science, right? Like you say that, okay, well, we're going to construct an experiment. So we have a hypothesis. If gravity does this, then we'll see this. And he goes, no, stop. Because you have to prove gravity first. But we're like, but that's part, I mean, I don't understand the scientific method, but I know that they're wrong because the experts believe that gravity is true and that one experiment with the tension rod and the balls spin, I mean, again, it's crazy. It sounds crazy, but the scientists know what they're doing. And I don't want to try to redefine science. I'll let the experts tell me what science is. And we're just at their, we're at their mercy, unfortunately. Using the Bible to prove that the earth is young or flat. I don't like that. I think that again, the Bible's got bigger things to deal with. It seems to me like taking these verses and saying, this says that the earth is flat, or this says that it's unreasonable to believe that the earth is young or old or whatever. It's like taking Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech and making it about making sure that we all have a happy, good life. We get the right parking spot, like Joel Osteen stuff. That's the level of like violence being done to the scriptures that I feel like is being done to it when we're trying to use these awesome, holy, wonderful, powerful scriptures and making them about this. It makes me a little bit sad. The body's complex. But it's made out of naturally occurring things, right? I mean, we all turn back into dirt when we die. Again, I get it. It's very complex. It's extremely complex. It's mind-blowingly complex. I've always wondered though, like, why it seems like if God made humans just like at the like like we like to think on the whatever the fourth day or the second day or whatever, Why wouldn't humans be like a video game avatar? Like inside of this, there's just nothing. It's just code or something. Like, you know how like video game characters can like glitch through walls and there's nothing inside. Like you go up on a wall and the camera kind of pans inside their head and there's nothing in there. That seems like that proves that it's like a created thing. But this body that, you know, eats and poops and sweats and is, you know, I mean, bodies are gross and they're like naturally occurring gross, but also beautiful and wonderful thing. So that seems to be like an Osteen thing. It's not doing the Bible justice. The fossil record, and also like the geologic column thing. It's astounding to me. He's brought this up every single time, and I think I've formulated a pretty good response to this, and I don't think anybody else has come up with something like this. So we would all accept if you go to like Mesopotamia or like the Near East, and there's like a city, right? And if you dig down, like Jerusalem, okay, you dig down below Jerusalem, there's old Jerusalem. Or like Seattle. I'm like kind of by Seattle. Underneath Seattle is old Seattle. I mean, this one's older than this one, right? And they do this all the time in ancient times. The city would get raised by a volcano or the bad guys over there, and then they'd build on top of it. And then they'd build on top of that one. And before you know it, you got this big dome kind of thing. And there's the older ones down here and the new ones. I mean, the earth is like that. It's the same thing. A forest grows. It all dies, and then there's dirt, and then more trees, and then, you know, there's stuff like that. I mean, seems to make sort of sense. I'm offering up some science, but I'm not really, you know, qualified to do it. But I mean, I'm just going to offer that up. Take it for what it is. You shake up a bottle filled with rocks and stuff, and they always organize. So therefore, the flood did it. I mean, that seems to me to the same thing when a flat earther says they take a basketball and they spray a hose on it, like when the water just runs off. I mean, it makes sense. They're like, what? How could the earth hold all the water when it just run off down? I mean, and look, I can do this experiment. I have a basketball, I pour water, and it just falls off, and I spin it, and it flies off everywhere. And then they conclude it's impossible. Gravity doesn't hold the earth down, and gravity's fake, and the earth is not flat.
1 minute.
I mean, these are just, it seems to me to be the same kind of thing. I don't understand it, but I know that just because it's crazy to me doesn't mean it's not true. Picking things out of textbooks and things, again, the flat earthers do that. They take NASA quotes, they'll take military literature quotes, and they'll make them say things that of course they don't mean. Of course, the military doesn't think the earth is flat. Of course, NASA documents, they don't think it's flat, but they can make it seem like they think it's flat. But you don't accept that. I don't accept that. But it seems to be doing the same kind of thing. So, the end.
All right, just on time. I appreciate that 8-minute rebuttal there, Jonathan. We are now moving into Kent's uninterrupted 8-minute rebuttal. So, Dr. Dino, whenever you're ready, you have 8 minutes on the clock, and the floor is yours. Oh, Kent, I think you're. Mike.
There we go. I have to mute myself during our thunderstorm here. Sorry about that. Okay.
That's okay.
According to evolution, it should get better automatically, but I can't wait millions of years. You ought to beware about the majority. They're often wrong. Even Mark Twain, when you find yourself on the side of the majority, it's time to pause and reflect. Stop and think. Wrong is wrong, even if everybody's doing it. Right is right, even if you're the only one doing it. And majority may be wrong. And you kept saying over in your thing to follow the experts, okay? For many years, the majority of the public school teachers believed in prayer in schools. Were they right? Now they don't believe in prayer in schools. Do you follow the majority? The majority of people followed Adolf Hitler, in Germany anyway. The majority does not make anything sense as far as right or wrong. Majority followed Stalin. You should read Gulag Archipelago and see the stuff they did to the people they put in the prison camps in Russia. They would cram them into the cell where every yard had 3 people, every square yard, and leave them there for days. Starve them. No water, no sleep, can't lay down. So just the fact that the majority believes something doesn't mean it's right. Now, you kept trying to equate young Earth with flat Earth. Jonathan, that is absolutely not true. I believe the Earth is round. It is a sphere. It spins around 1,037.6 miles per hour at the equator, depending on your altitude. It is tilted over 23.5 degrees, and it circles the sun once a year. 365.2422 days it takes to go around, depending on what you use as your starting point. So I understand. And the gravity of the Earth is in the center of the Earth. So water is attracted to the center, not down this way. The dumb flat earthers think, oh, you pour water on a ball, it runs down. Well, yeah, on a ball, because the gravity is below the ball, but Earth is the gravity in the center. I am not a flat earther. The Earth is round. Kansas is flat, but the rest of it is round, okay? Part of Texas is flat too. So stop equating young Earth to flat Earth. That's not true. Evolution might be equated with flat Earth. They're both just as dumb. Nobody's ever seen any animal or plant produce anything other than its kind. It just doesn't happen. You can believe that if you wish, but it's not science. So if you're following the majority, the broad way leads to the pit. The narrow way leads to the kingdom of heaven. I think you ought to get on that. And you made a snide comment there about taking half the quote. Jonathan, I take that as an insult. I'd like you to show me where I don't give the quote and the reference and give the exact meaning. The books clearly teach the earth began as a hot ball of rock. I showed you many quotes. Read it for yourself. The books clearly teach the whole universe, everything fit into a dot smaller than a period on a page. That's what they teach. And it is absolutely true. You cannot squeeze a cup of water into a dot smaller than a period. You're sure not going to squeeze the whole Pacific Ocean into the dot, or the whole Earth, or all the planets, or all the stars. There's a whole lot of stars out there, lots of them. So, and there is no fossil record, and there is no geologic column. Show it to me. You said old Seattle is under new Seattle. Well, yeah, they moved existing dirt and materials and bricks and stones in there. So the age of the bricks would all be the same age. If the whole earth was created at the same time, whether it's 6,000 years ago or 6 trillion years ago, every speck of dirt would be the same age. If you move it on top of another, that doesn't change the age of it. It changes the age it was placed there. So is the geologic column only telling when it was placed, but the material is actually still the same age? Well, then all the carbon dating and potassium, argon, rubidium, strontium, lead 208, lead 206, all of that's useless because all the material is the same age. They moved it around. If you shuffle a deck of cards, is the top card younger? Moving material in to build a new Seattle on top of the old Seattle does not make it a different age. The material is the same age. Jonathan, fatally flawed argument. I think you need to rethink one more time what you've been taught. Let's see. I'm not a flat earther. Okay. Let's see. I want to get to, in my 8 minutes here. Okay, 245. There. Macroevolution. The title of the debate is there reasonable evidence for evolution? Macroevolution is where you change from one kind of animal to another. Large-scale evolution. There is no evidence for this at all, ever. Macroevolution processes take place in populations and the genotypes, really. I don't think it takes place at all. The geneticists and biologists all accept evolution. Well, I don't care. They all accepted Adolf Hitler as leader of Germany, too. A bunch of Americans were dumb enough to vote for Biden. Can you believe that? Doesn't mean it's true. And as I mentioned, Jonathan, you are right. I accept the fact cows can jump. No question. I think with a little training, you get them to jump higher. Therefore, I accept the fact that cows, if you give them enough time, could jump over the moon. See, this is what macroevolution is. We see variations within the kind. We don't see it go beyond that. They've now got 339 breeds of dogs, from little bitty ones to great big ones, and they're always a dog. They've been trying to get bigger and bigger dogs like the Mastiff. Do you think they'll ever get a dog as big as an elephant? There are animals as big as an elephant, like an elephant. There are limits to these changes. God, don't stick your head in the sand. God said they will bring forth after their kind, and that's all that's ever happened. I got a bunch of examples. Here we go, right here, right there at it. 260, Alt-DV, 260. I accept the fact that there are many different types of corn. There are 200 varieties of wheat. I accept that. Most have been cultivated by man. Most would not survive in the wild. Farmers have taken care of their wheat and selected the grains to get it to grow in sandy soil or muddy soil or hot climate or cold climate. This is what horticulture and farming is all about. There's 200 varieties of wheat that had a common ancestor called wheat. There are 400 varieties of potatoes. They might have had a common ancestor called a potato. 339 breeds of dogs might have had a common ancestor called a dog. God said they'd bring forth after their kind. It's clear, it's reasonable to believe there are limits to what we see. God said they'll bring forth after their kind. It's very reasonable to believe that. So Darwin wrote a book and called it Origin of Species. Nobody's ever given a solid definition of what a species is. They pick at the word kind. I'm not asking mine be taught. They're asking theirs be taught. Microevolution is variations within those kinds. Now that one happens. We see billions of examples of microevolution. But they take these examples of variations, like there are 60 varieties of ducks, okay? 64 varieties of herons, all right? I agree. It's 4,000 varieties of potatoes, okay? Does that prove potatoes and herons are related?
1 minute.
But they put them on the chart and draw lines between them, showing the potato and the whale have a common ancestor. And they make these trees of life, which are absolute insanity. I think it's evil to teach this to kids. It is not reasonable to think a human and a mosquito have a common ancestor. You can trust the experts if you want, Jonathan. You're going to regret that judgment day. All right, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Dino, for your 8-minute rebuttal. Time is flying by. Great debate so far. Thank you, Jonathan and Kent. We are now moving into the open discussion portion of the debate. The topic for tonight, again, is there reasonable evidence for evolution? So, guys, let's make sure we are focusing on the topic of the debate tonight. And as we always do, we like to make sure these discussions are cordial, respectful, and focusing on one topic at a time. So since Kent just ended with his rebuttal, Jonathan, I want to hand it over to you to kind of start us off in this discussion portion. And gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Maybe I'd like to kind of talk about like the reasonable thing. Like I think it's reasonable to be consistent in your epistemology, right? And I feel like I trust the experts on everything else I don't understand. So I don't understand why I don't fly off the earth, because it's spinning really fast. So why do you think it's, when I think about a young earther, it seems like they trust the scientists with everything else except that one thing. So that seems to be more unreasonable, don't you think?
What was the question? I don't follow you there.
So when I'm looking at all the beliefs I hold, I trust the experts with everything, even if I don't understand it. I don't understand how the earth spins 1,000 miles an hour and I don't feel it, don't fly off the earth. I don't understand much of that stuff to any level. I trust them with everything else, all the experts in every situation. But then, like when I was a young earther, I same thing. I trust all the experts on everything else except for that one thing. That seems to be more unreasonable than to just trust them blindly.
All right, if a fish is in a river and the fish is holding perfectly still, but the river is going 20 miles an hour, the fish doesn't feel the movement. The whole river is moving and he's just sitting there calmly going along, go with the flow. We are standing on a planet that has an atmosphere about 60 miles thick. As we spin, the atmosphere goes with us, so you don't feel it. We're right. Yes, we are spinning. I'm in Lenox, Alabama, 31 degrees above the equator. We're turning 886 miles an hour toward the east, but the air is going with us, so you don't feel it. It's very reasonable. Scientists understand this, have understood this for a long time. Gravity is attracted toward the middle. The air is held toward the middle. You don't fly off the earth. Gravity is holding you in. Centrifugal force of the spin of the earth is probably making you a hair lighter, not probably very measurable, but yes. But the gravity is holding me down, a little over 200 pounds, a few pounds too many, but probably centrifugal force throwing me out. I could explain all that, but trust the experts. That's a dangerous thing. Dangerous attitude to have. Trust but verify might be smarter. If all the people said, hey, let's all go jump off this cliff. No. If everybody says, hey, let's all do something that is obviously anti-scripture, well, no, you're not going to do that. So you need to have a better standard, I think, Jonathan, than just the majority. I have a standard that doesn't change.
Yeah, and I agree with you that it is kind of scary because we could run into this like kind of, Orwellian world where science takes over and just makes up stuff that we have to believe. But you and I both accept the experts on everything else, except you don't trust them or accept what they say about the age of the earth. And I know that you have reasons to do that, but that seems to be inconsistent, right? Because you don't understand, and I don't understand a lot of physics. I don't understand how spaceships work and how phones work. They're very complicated, but we trust them. And I don't understand how evolution works, and it doesn't make sense. It sounds crazy, but I just feels like I have to blindly trust them just for the sake of consistency. Don't you, right?
Well, which experts? A bunch of experts vote Republican, a bunch of other experts vote Democrat, a bunch of other ones are independent. Which experts are you going to trust? I mean, you're going to trust the experts in a Muslim country where they say you got to pray toward the east or toward Mecca 3 times a day and put your head on the ground till you get a raisin head on there, a dot on your head. They're the experts. They tell the people, hey, you got to pray because, Muhammad was a prophet. That's what they tell them. So would you trust those experts? Which experts are you going to pick? I'll tell you what, pick me. I'm an expert. The earth is 6,000 years old. God made it and the Bible's true. How's that? Case closed. Go ahead.
Well, I just think there's scientific experts and then there's people who are authorities on religions, but that seems like a totally different thing, like a theological authority as opposed to a scientific expert seems to be different.
Well, all through history, we have a lot of examples where science has been wrong. I'm trying to find it here. I've got too many slides here. They have, for years, they taught a big rock falls faster than a little rock. Aristotle, I believe, said that. Take a 10-pound rock and a 1-pound rock, the 10-pound rock falls faster. They taught that for 2,000 years. Galileo came along and said, wait a minute. I don't think so. I think they all fall the same speed. And he tested it, and sure enough, all rocks, all weights fall the same speed if you discount air resistance. So the experts were wrong. They used to teach if you're sick, all the doctors taught, if you're sick, take out your blood. You got bad blood. You'll get better if you take your blood out. That's how George Washington died. The experts were wrong. I love science. I'm not against science at all. I love the modern inventions we have, the microphones and the cell phones and the stuff like that. Ballpoint pen, boy, that's a great idea. So, but be careful about just committing to the experts say. You'll find a lot of scientists believe the earth is not billions of years old. A lot of them do. But in communist countries, I bet in North Korea, you'll find everybody supports the communist government. All the experts say communism is good, because if you don't say that, you end up dead. So yeah, be careful with that. I think you got a really bad philosophy on life here, just to trust the experts. Trust but verify.
I understand it. I just think we don't really have another choice. But I would also say the people who believe the earth is flat say the same things. They're like, don't trust the experts because, and they'll bring up like, well, what's his name? Newton said this thing, and then he was wrong because Einstein came and said that's not true, and it's all wrong because they're both wrong. They'll do the same kind of thing. Science is wrong sometimes, therefore you can never trust it. But you would argue against that the same way I would, and I would just point out that their misunderstanding of science is wrong sometimes doesn't mean it's always wrong. It's the same kind of thing to me. Like they know, it seems like they know what they're talking about, even though it doesn't make sense, like on the ground level for people like me, I guess.
Well, there are many things. I don't think it's possible to have all the knowledge of every area in one person's brain. I don't understand all about computers. I use one every day. I think it's amazing what they've done with computers, but I'm no expert on that. I've got people on my staff. I call them, hey, how do you make this work? They come over and they hit the button and make it work. So some people are specialists in mechanics. They're good with cars. Okay, let them do their job. Some are good plumbers. Some are good electricians. I understand your point, but it's not just trust. When I have an electrician come here to do something, my dad was an electrical engineer. I've built 9 houses, well, more than that now. I love electrical work. I'm not the expert in it, but I'm, 5th grade level compared to some, the kindergarten level. But so I listen to their, what they say, and okay, I want to understand. Sometimes you got to give up and say, I'm sorry, I trust you, just do it. Okay, I understand. Sometimes that is all you can do. But to do that on this, which goes against what you've done, Jonathan, you've trusted some experts that you think are experts that have gone directly against what Jesus said, directly against what the Bible says. You have given up God's word because of some experts. Jesus said the creation of Adam was the beginning. You gave that up. The Bible says in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. You gave that up. In 10 Commandments, it says in 6 days, the Lord made heaven and earth and the sea and everything in them. Was God lying? Because what you've done, Jonathan, whether you realize it or not, you are calling God a liar. You're saying this book is not only inaccurate, it's lying. It says God made everything in 6 days. The Bible says nothing died until Adam sinned. You think, if evolution is true, lots of things died to bring man into the world. The Bible teaches man brought death into the world. Evolution says death brought man into the world. Evolution is a religion of suffering and death. If one animal evolves a little better than the rest of them got to die. They are the inferior species now. That's Adolf Hitler 101. I think you made a serious mistake.
Yeah, let me get in on this Bible thing. I love the Bible, and I would never want somebody to think that I'm trying to compromise on it or whatever. But I've just learned over the years that
I think Jonathan, I think you're trying to compromise. Go ahead.
You're probably right. I mean, I like to just cherry pick it or whatever. But I've just learned over the years that when I think, okay, the Bible might mean this or this or this or this, then an expert comes along who's devoted their life to reading the Bible and understanding it, that they'll say, well, no, it probably means this. And I'll go, oh, well, I never thought of that. Or, it just seems like there's even experts on the Bible that I'm just kind of beholden to. And I would rather trust the experts in the people that that know what they're doing with their reading the Bible than me try to guess or whatever. Because even when Jesus says, or whoever says, in the beginning God created, like in the New Testament, the beginning was this or whatever, I bet you I could find a Bible scholar that you would accept as somebody who loves God that would have a different interpretation. Well, Jesus actually meant this other thing, and he's not trying to say that you need to take Genesis literally. It means something else. And it's kind of the same thing with that example I brought up earlier with the Martin Luther King speech. That's a very radical speech about injustice and suffering and racism, and to bring it down to a level of like, it just about your personal happiness or something, which never happens. But that seems to be the same thing. Jesus in the New Testament probably has some really radical thing, life altering, world crushing thing, and then it seems like, well, it actually just means like this lower thing of make sure that you believe that it literally was like this or this. Seems to be that kind of thing.
I don't know if that was a question in there or not, but Donnie, are we off track?
No, not really.
Are we off track here? We're supposed to be on quick Q&A.
Yeah, let me. I'm going to jump in here. So we talked about the experts, majority opinion. We talked about epistemology. We talked about what it means to be reasonable in terms of evidence. We got a wild, lively chat, and people. We've got a lot of questions actually for the Q&A portion, Jonathan. Of people simply asking you what is your favorite line of evidence for evolution, or even your best line of evidence for evolution. Why don't we exhaust the topic? Spend the last few minutes here in the discussion now, kind of focusing on a couple lines of evidence that we can engage, Jonathan. So maybe. I know it's tough to just pick one if you think there's a body of evidence, but maybe we'll just have you pick one or two.
Well, how about the column thing? Because I think that's an interesting one, right? So you think that there's no geologic column and that they're all the same age. And I get what you're saying. I've actually thought that same thing. I remember thinking that, like, where's all this material coming from? Like, is there like some giant hole over there and it's filling up? But I think it is the same thing as like a city, right? I mean, I get that you're saying that old Seattle's the same as new Seattle, but if you took a piece of metal from old Seattle and a piece of metal from new Seattle, wouldn't there be some method to determine this piece of metal was made earlier than the new piece of metal?
Well, there would be a difference of when the metal was formed, but the iron ore was the same age. If all the iron ore formed at the same time,
right? But that's what they're doing, right? They're saying
right.
these layers of Earth this was a ancient forest, and it was created, you know, earlier than that.
If I said this coffee cup was made 4 years ago, and I get another coffee cup that's made 500 years ago, okay, they're both made of clay. The clay was all made at the same time. It was fashioned into a cup at a different time, and New Seattle was fashioned at a different time than Old Seattle, but the material they built from has to all be the same age. How can the layers not be the same age? Is the top layer coming from outer space? Where's it coming from?
In the way that you're phrasing it, like, of course, it's like all the same age, like whether it's 6,000 or 6 billion, right? But there seems like there's ways to tell this old Seattle thing was made this long ago, and this new Seattle was made this long ago. So isn't there ways to tell this old forest was made this long ago and this newer forest up here was made this long ago, right? Aren't there ways to tell when they were made, as opposed to like the fundamental particles were created, like, you know, by God or whatever?
Well, that's my point. Yes, we can tell they were made at different times, but the particles are all the same age. The geologic column is teaching the kids that the particles of dirt are all different ages.
I don't think that's what they're saying. They're just saying that this layer, you know, is filled with these, like, it's like ancient forests and ancient, you know, shallow oceans. Everything dies and falls to the bottom and creates layers of stuff. And they could tell, well, all these stuff died around this time ago, right? And then stuff died on top of it. And there's ways to tell how old they are, not like when they were first created, but like when they died, or, you know, it's different than like when they were created. It's like the Seattle thing. They can tell that old Jerusalem was this old because it was these adobe bricks were made a little longer ago than these adobe bricks, not because they're like particles or different ages on a geological cosmic time scale, but when they were made, right?
No, see, they're missing the whole point. The geologic column is telling the kids the material is different ages. If I took a bunch of cards, spread them out across the table, and then stacked them all up in a stack, is the top card younger, or was it placed on the stack last? Well, yeah, it was placed on the stack last, but they're all the same age. And if you take dirt and move it from here to here on top of this one, it's still the same dirt, it's still the same age. My point is, the geologic column does not exist like they teach it in the textbook. And they'll admit it once in a while. If there were a column of sediments, unfortunately, no such column exists. They made up the whole thing. It's baloney. So as far as testing them, the way they tell the age of those layers is by the fossils they find in them. And the way they tell the age of the fossils is by which layer it came from. Complete circular reasoning. I covered that last night on my Whack an Atheist program on Dinosaur Adventureland YouTube channel.
So, but I mean, so again, let me go back to the Seattle thing. Like,
Sure.
Isn't there a way to tell that they're different ages? So whatever method they use to tell that old Seattle is different than new Seattle and old Jerusalem is different than new Jerusalem is the same methods they can use to determine the bottom layer of some whatever geological stuff is older than the next one up.
You're still not getting it. This coffee cup, let's make a number up and say it was made 4 years ago, okay? I could go to an antique store and find some pottery made 200 years ago. I agree, this was made after that one was made. But the clay, both made from clay, came out of the dirt, and the clay would all have to have formed either at the Big Bang, when they say, or when the Earth cooled down. The clay would all be the same age. It was fashioned into a coffee cup at a different time, and New Seattle was fashioned into New Seattle after, so was New Jerusalem after Old Jerusalem. But the material is the same age, whether it's 6,000 or 6 trillion.
But, okay, but is there a way to date Old Jerusalem and have it come out older than New Jerusalem?
Yes, you would find out the city was built out of the material. It was fashioned in. There's probably a way to tell that this pottery was put into this form after the other one was.
So if you take that method and apply it to the earth sediments, it would do the same thing. This layer's older than this one, right?
No.
But you just admitted that the old Jerusalem's older than the new Jerusalem. Like there's ways to tell that, so why can't they just use that same method?
They're telling when it was fashioned. They might have used a different method of firing the pottery 4 years ago than they did 200 years ago. Maybe they've improved the methods of creating pottery. Maybe they've improved the methods of building cities where they now have different tensile strength in the steel or something. And you could look at the steel and say the hardness of this steel compared to the old Seattle. But the steel is the same age. It's when it was fashioned. I don't know how you're not getting it.
No, I get it. I get it. It's the same. Like the atoms are like the same age, right? I get it. But they were fashioned. They were made at different times. Just like at the bottom, at a different geological column. This forest was made before this forest.
But when they carbon date things, they're testing the atoms. So they should all give the same number.
But are they testing the atoms, or are they doing like the same kind of thing as like when they date old Seattle and new Seattle and Jerusalem and stuff like that?
Well, on my video number 7, question answer in my seminar series, you can get the whole thing for $50. I go a lot through carbon date. I'm going to redo that in the next couple of days on my YouTube channel, Dinosaur Adventureland. And yes, we'll be talking about carbon dating. But the geologic column does not exist, and they date it's circular reasoning. They date the fossils by the layers and the layers by the fossils. And they admit it, circular reasoning. I've got a bunch of quotes on that if you want to see it, but I covered that last night in my Whack an Atheist program I did. So I think we need to go to another question, Donnie, unless you got beating this dead horse here.
Yeah, let me jump in. So, Jonathan, now we've kind of discussed the geological column. Is there reasonable evidence for evolution? Maybe one final kind of line of evidence that you might think is convincing. Jonathan, let's say there's someone on the fence, and you were trying to convince them of, say, universal common ancestry, right? All plants and animals related through common ancestry. What line of evidence would you point to, right? Would it be homology, transitional forms, nested hierarchies? You know, let's choose one and then engage that one further.
I mean, I literally would just say the same thing. Like, I trust the experts just like we all trust the experts, and we don't want to like nitpick. I trust them on everything else except this one thing, you know, just like the flat earthers do that. And I don't think we would agree with that, but maybe we don't want to talk about that. What about this? I would say I have chickens, and I was processing them, murdering them the other day, and I noticed that, you know, one of like they have fingers right in their wings, and one of them has like a little claw that you don't see. Maybe I point to that. That's interesting. Aaron Raw over there, he's got emus, and if you look under their little feathers, they got little tiny little gross little, you know, hands under there, little chicken wings. Like it seems like. And then you go to the zoo and you watch an emu and you hear the sound they make, it'd be like something that you'd think is a dinosaur. They got dinosaur legs, you know. It just, I don't know. There's something about it. I think they might be onto something like that.
We have emus also. We had 3 of them. One was kind of unfriendly, so he ended up on Thanksgiving dinner table. So now we have 2.
Did you really eat that thing?
I did not eat it yet. I would, yeah. And they have little tiny wings. You're right. They're pretty useless. That would be. But even if they used to be a functional wing, which is unlikely, that would be losing something, not gaining something. That is the exact opposite of what evolution needs. You got to gain a whole bunch of stuff to have a wing that would fly. So the fact that the emu wing has little claws on it, maybe they use them for something. I don't know. A lot of animals have little claws they use, like the snakes. Snakes have little claws that they use for mating. They can't talk and say, "Scoot over, honey." So they use the little claws to move each other around. So that's got nothing to do with walking on land, though. So I think even if we don't fully understand what the purpose of something is, there's things on my car. There's buttons on the car. I don't know what they're for. I don't need to know all of them. I got enough. I can start the car and drive it. Okay, that's plenty.
With the emu thing, like you know, when you say, okay, what's the evidence for evolution? Well, it has to change things. But then when we look at like, oh well, maybe the ancient ancestor of emu was something like a raptor that had long arms, right? Like a whatever velociraptor, and then those arms got shrinkier and shrinkier and shrinkier. That seems to be pretty good. I mean, evolution can lose things and gain things and change things. It doesn't have to always be like a gain, right? I mean,
but see, like that's imagination. We've never seen that happen. Science deals with what we can observe, study, test, and demonstrate. We've never seen an emu produce a non-emu. If you want to imagine that a raptor turned into an emu, that's fine, but now you've gone into imagination and you left science way behind. The topic of the debate is there reasonable evidence for evolution? What on earth was the evidence presented to you to make you leave being a Calvary Chapel pastor and become an atheist or an evolutionist? What was the evidence they gave you?
I'm not an atheist, and I don't like these titles or whatever. I just want to have it all, right? I want to accept all the science and be consistent with my blind trust in the experts, and have the title of other things. Like, I want to be a Christian. I want to follow Jesus. I want to know the way of Jesus and experience all that life has. But I mean, the evidence was just a long string of things, like that maybe the Bible has more. It's not about a literal thing. It's bigger than that. It's better and stronger. And so it's kind of a death by a thousand cuts kind of thing.
I guess I took on your logo the A in faith. It looks like the same A the atheists use all the time. So I thought.
Oh no, that's an anarchy thing. I'm kind of an anarchist. I don't even know what anarchy means, but I think it's kind of edgy or whatever.
Okay. All the evidence I've ever seen presented for evolution has been proven wrong. They taught back in the 1830s or 40s that the baby growing in the mother has gill slits. They're still teaching this. That was proven wrong in 1874. Embryological evidence for evolution, Aaron Nelson, Leon or whatever his name is, Leroy, Aaron Nelson, he's still using it. Proven wrong in 1874. Those are not gill slits, but they still teach it. This is evidence that they present to the kids that causes them to believe this dumb theory, and it's wrong. It's a lie. Satan is a liar. He lied to Eve and Adam. He lied to Cain and Abel. He lied all through history, and he's lying about the gill slits on the embryo. So I'd like to know, what evidence did they show you? Is there any reasonable evidence to make you believe that the raptor turned to a chicken, or that you are related to a mosquito? Well, let me start there. Do you believe, given billions of years, you are related to a mosquito?
I just believe what the experts tell me blindly. But let me also answer the question that I wish you would have asked. So the thing with the analogy you just made with the gill slits or whatever. I mean, if a flat earther came up to you and said, Newton said gravity was like this, and then Einstein said, well, it's not really like that, it's like this other thing, what would you tell them? Is gravity wrong, or did they just refine the theory a little bit?
Well, science deals with things we can observe, study, and test, and it's always wise to question that. I bet the people who make candles couldn't even think about electric lights. Well, it'd put them out of business, wouldn't it? And the atheists like their atheism, and they like evolution theory because it gets rid of God's word. It gets rid of the 10 Commandments. They'll say, thou shalt not commit adultery. Well, maybe they like to commit adultery, so they'll say, oh, the book's not true. Maybe they rejected this book for other reasons, which is what the Bible says they're going to do at the end of time, because they love their sin. Men love darkness rather than light because their deeds are evil. I don't think there's any scientific evidence that any animal has ever produced a different kind of animal. I've been looking for it for years. I've asked atheists all over the place, where's the evidence of any animal changing?
Hold on a second. Can't if a flat earther came up to you and said, Newton said that gravity was like this, and then Einstein came along and said, no, that's not really right, it's like this, and then the flat earthers say, therefore gravity is wrong, right? What would you tell them?
Well, I'd say, let's test it. Let's go outside and drop you off a cliff and see if you fall.
But you wouldn't agree with them that just because science changed a little bit and somebody came along and modified it, that it's all wrong, right? I mean, science changes all the time, but sure. You would not agree with the flat earther that because Einstein changed things a little bit, that it means it's wrong. It just means that's just how science works, right?
Well, science works. You discover new things like, wow, that's pretty cool. And I think I'm all in favor of it. Somebody might come up with a new way of making coffee cups. Well, great, yay. Right after World War II, or right about there, they invented plastic. Whoa, who'd have thunk it? You can take oil products and turn them into plastic and use it to hold water. I think it's a great idea. I use it all the time. So I'm in favor of science, but there is no evidence that any animal has ever produced a different kind of animal. They believe it very strongly, but it's not science.
But before you move on, it seems like the thing with the flat earthers with Newton and Einstein is the same as the embryo thing. Like, they're not gill slits, right? They're gill, or they called them something else now, right? I mean, just because they called it one thing earlier and then they kind of modified it, they're like, well, they're not really gill slits, but in fish, those things turn into gills, and in humans, they turn into your neck or whatever. Just because they changed it a little bit doesn't mean they're like always wrong, right? Just with like the Einstein and Newton thing, it just means that it changes and gets better. Don't you think that that's like the same thing?
I have never said science is always wrong. I love science. But when they are wrong, they should admit it. They're wrong. These are never gill slits. They're little folds of skin that develop into bones in the ear and glands in the throat. I'll show you. There it is right there, an actual photograph of a baby growing inside the mother. They never have anything to do with breathing. Why are they still teaching this, that they're gills? They're not gills. They're nothing like gills. I got folds of skin right here in my elbow when I fold my arm. I can't breathe through them. The skin wrinkles up. Oh, so what? Wrinkles up a little more than it used to 20 years ago, too. But we definitely do have the same basic structures. They're saying, Ben Wagner, I debated him, said he's still teaching. He teaches biology in Arkansas at college, an accredited university, and he's still teaching the baby has gill slits. Professor Dave is still teaching it. I told him, Dave, this was proven wrong in 1874. Stop. But this is the justification for abortion. They like the idea, let's eliminate babies that we don't want. They commit adultery or commit fornication, get pregnant. Well, let's kill the evidence. Well, why don't you kill the fornicator instead? Let the baby live. So they keep it in the textbooks. That's the only way to justify abortion, because some idiots would like to reduce the human population to 500 million.
What? Wait, I don't know how you went from the gill slits thing to abortion. That's
why you keep it in the books. They want the mother to believe, oh, you're not killing a human, you're killing a fish.
Oh, okay. Well, I agree with you that it's like a dehumanizing thing, right? They say it's not a human, it's a fetus, right? It's like you dehumanize something before you can kill it. I agree with you on that, but I don't think they've got some like, evil intentions behind the thing. I mean, they're just doing their jobs, don't you think?
Okay, let me jump in here. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ken.
No, I'm ready for the next question. We're beating around the bush here. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, Jonathan, we can either jump into closing statements now, as we do have a ton of great audience questions, unless you wanted to ask one final question in favor of, I guess your affirmative tonight. One final line of evidence you wanted to engage for the last minute or two, but it's up to you.
Yeah. Let me ask one more thing. Okay. The cows jumping over the moon thing. Again, it's just a brilliant analogy, and I think that it's really clever. But I don't see how it's any different than if the flat earther said gravity can hold down all the vast oceans, but then a little blade of grass and a flower and a butterfly, it doesn't crush them to the ground with this massive force, right? Like they're portraying it in this crazy light to make their point sound provocative, but they're obviously wrong with yours. And it seems to me like yours is kind of the same kind of thing. It's portraying it like, make it sound like crazy mouth, right? Cows can jump over they can jump, but they can't jump over the moon, right? Gravity can hold down the vast oceans, but it can't hold a tiny flower. Therefore it's not real. How are those seem to be the same. How are those different?
I have been resisting gravity all my life. Sometimes it gets harder to get up in the morning. You want to just lay there. And gravity, I learned about gravity early in life. You fall off something and hit the ground and it hurts. And oh, wow, gravity. So the flat earthers, why you keep equating it to that, I don't understand. I'm not a flat earther, never have been, never will be, okay? The earth is round and it spins. But I want to get off on that, how flowers grow against gravity. I can go up against gravity and stand. Here, watch this. Went against gravity right there. But see what they're doing, they're taking examples of variation. You said earlier, your kids are different than you. I agree, so are mine. But they're still human. They're still the same kind. So they take examples of the different varieties of humans. We got black ones and white ones and yellow ones and, different color skin colors and tall ones and short ones and curly hair and straight hair and blue eyes and brown eyes. And okay, there's a lot of varieties of humans out there, a lot of them. But
I'm not talking about the variety thing. I'm talking about like the analogy itself.
Okay, that's why.
The analogy of gravity can hold down the oceans, but it can't pull down flowers. Would you agree that's a bad analogy? You probably would, right? And I'm saying your analogy is equally as kind of deceptive in a way. Just because you can construct an analogy that kind of works on like a kind of like a intuitional way doesn't mean it's wrong. Doesn't mean gravity's wrong, and doesn't mean evolution's wrong. It just means it's not intuitive, right?
Well, I would not equate evolution with gravity. Gravity's been well tested. We can observe it, we can study it, we can test it. You can go drop something off and time it. Do that with show me an animal producing a different kind of animal. They got lines on the chart. So right here, humans are connected to monkeys on this chart. Where's the evidence of any monkey ever producing a non-monkey baby? There's none. This is all imagination. This is different than me going out and dropping a rock and testing it. I can see gravity. The science is what we observe. Where's the scientific evidence that humans and monkeys are related? Why would anybody believe that?
You really should watch some flat Earth debates. I mean, because they would say, I know you're not. I'm not really either. I got to stop. But they would say the same thing. They would say, well, you drop a rock. We don't know that that's gravity. That could be buoyancy. That could be density. You know, they just deny all of it because it doesn't fit their thing. And then they come up with analogies. But you would agree with me that their analogies are false, and they're not exampling their thing, the scientific evidence correctly. They're making it sound crazy. And I'm saying that what your analogies just seem to be the same thing. They're portraying it in a crazy light to make it sound crazy. But just because it sounds crazy doesn't mean it is crazy. It just means it's crazy.
I understand. Now, the cow jumping over the moon is an example. We could train cows to jump higher if we worked them out. Get them a coach and get them in the gym, lifting weights or whatever cows do. I don't know. But we could get them to jump higher. But we could not get one to jump over the moon. Okay. Farmers have been getting varieties of potatoes. They'll never get one as big as New York City, and they'll never turn it into an airplane or a whale. The charts, though, show potatoes and whales having a common ancestor. That's where the analogy is dead on. It doesn't matter how many farmers, all the farmers in the history of the world that have planted corn always got corn. No exceptions. You might get big corn or little corn, but you're going to get corn. And humans, when they make babies, always make humans. No exceptions. None. But they got the chart right here in the textbook showing humans and monkeys related. That's not science. That's a religious belief. That's SpongeBob imagination. So my analogy is good about the cow. Yes, you can get cows to jump higher, but you're going to be limited. Someday you'll reach a limit. And I bet it's probably less than 10 feet. Certainly not going to get one to jump to the moon. And you can get humans that make big babies and little babies and, yeah, there's a variety of humans and a variety of potatoes and a variety of corn, a variety of dogs, but they're limited to exactly what God said would happen. They bring forth after their kind. That's all we've ever seen. And science is what we can see and observe and test and study. I could do it. We've done it here many times. We crossbreed our chickens. They make baby chickens without exception. And our chickens show no interest whatsoever in mating with the pine trees. None. But the textbook show the pine tree and the chicken related. I think that's stupid.
I think it sounds just as crazy, but I think it also, if I said to you, the Earth, if you go out there and look, it looks flat, and I don't feel like I'm moving, right?
Okay,
that seems to be the same thing. Like, it sounds crazy that we're all related to dirt and rocks, but just because it's crazy and intuitive doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means that it's complicated.
Well, yeah, I don't know why you're stuck on the flat Earth thing. I bet an ant on a 20-foot beach ball it looks flat to an ant on a beach ball, but it's not. Okay,
and I agree with you, but the flat Earth thing seems to be the same as the young Earth thing.
That's where you're wrong. How about if I said flat Earth is the same as evolution? How's that?
Well, yeah, but the consensus of the experts don't agree with the flat or the thing, right? But you accept the round Earth from the experts, but you don't accept the old Earth from the experts. And it seems to be like because
I already told you, Jonathan, I'm the expert. It's young.
Okay, I'll submit.
Okay, let's. Ken, if you wanted a quick final word in terms of the discussion, then we're going to go into
some. How about this one, Jonathan? Here's the expert. God said he made it in 6 days, all of it. Heaven and earth, stars, everything. Jesus said the creation of Adam was the beginning. Matthew 19:4, Mark 10:6. Bible says Eve is the mother of all living. I believe that. There's the expert. I think the expert is right there. God created the heaven and the earth. Hebrews, in the beginning, God made the heaven and the earth. Jesus was made, all things made by him. Jesus created all things in heaven and earth, Colossians chapter 1. There's the expert right there. And you are calling him a liar. I think you will regret that one day. I would encourage you to rethink it. Go ahead.
All right, let's end it there. Jonathan, there may be a couple things you want to respond to in terms of those points, but what we'll do is have concluding statements. So we'll have 5 minutes where both debaters, Jonathan and Kent, you guys can kind of wrap up your thoughts, wrap up your points, and address anything that you feel might have been left hanging. So Jonathan, let's hand it over to you. You have 5 minutes of uninterrupted time for your concluding statement. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Ken, for taking the time. I appreciate it, and I've had a grand old time, and I love being here. I mean, you know, with the Bible, I love it so much, but I think it's dangerous for me to try to speculate on what it means, and I just keep going back to when I hear the experts talk about it. It helps me. And again, I do that with everything else. Like, I'm an electrician and I don't try to do plumbing. I go and ask the plumbers, or I let them do it. Right. I don't try to do things by myself. And like N.T. Wright, he's a New Testament scholar. He says the same kind of thing. Like, we can all drive cars, but when it breaks down, we go to the experts, right? We can all read the Bible, but it's kind of dangerous because we can kind of get the thing like, okay, we got to love neighbor, love God. But then when it gets down to the nitty gritty of it, we have to go to the experts and let them help us. Let wise, godly people tell us what these things mean and not try to just make it up, because it seems to be incredibly dangerous. I mean, that's what cults have been doing for thousands of years, right? They'll take, like I saw that show that happened recently, Midnight Mass. They took the Bible and made it sound like the Eucharist has something to do with vampires, like we're eating God's flesh and drinking his blood, and it all made sense. They picked and chose, you know, this is what we like to do. We like to take the Bible and make it say whatever we want. But I want to let the experts do their thing and help us and use our God-given wisdom and rationality and things like this. So when the experts are telling me and saying these things are not literal things, these are old, ancient, beautiful sagas and parables, and we love parables in the Bible. And why can't Genesis be just another gorgeous, beautiful, fantastically powerful parable? It doesn't have to be a literal thing. We can just go with the parable thing, and I think that that's actually better. It actually makes, it's gonna help. It's helped me see my place in the world. It's brought me life, and it's brought me, you know, closer to godliness, I think, and it has a more of an impact on the world instead of us looking like we're attacking science. I think if Christianity just let the experts do their thing and we focused on justice, mercy, important things like that, not letting the experts do that stuff, and we'll just focus on this and not making the Bible say what we want it to say, but letting the wise academics help us to understand it, because when we bring our own preconceived notions to it, a scientific whatever, I think we're just doing violence to the Bible. We got to get back into for the first century, you know, Near East thing. I think that we're going to find that that's much more helpful, much more beautiful, much more potent, and it's going to allow us to be more effective for the gospel, more effective for this image-bearing journey that God wants to use through us, his creatures, his dirt, life-breathed creations. The end.
All right, I appreciate that concluding statement there, Jonathan. Now we're going to hand it over to Kent. Kent, you also have a concluding statement. You've got 5 minutes whenever you're ready.
Well, thank you so much, sir. Jonathan, if I found a fly in my water, I would pick out the fly. I'm not against water because I picked the fly out. I'm against flies in my water, okay? I'm not against science, but when scientists teach something that's wrong, I pick that out and I swallow the rest. I love science. I taught it 15 years. I'll debate any scientist you know. There is no evidence of any animal or plant ever producing offspring other than its kind. But to draw lines on paper in the charts that they use in school, I think is criminal. I think they should be fired for claiming that they are related to a mosquito. The expert said, he answered and said to them, have you not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female? Jesus said the creation of Adam and Eve was the beginning. And sure enough, if you add up the dates in the Bible, that's what you're going to get. Do you believe that? Same thing in Mark 10:6. From the beginning of the creation, God made them male and female. Do you believe that, Jonathan? I believe that. He's the expert. Jesus said the beginning was when he made Adam and Eve. He's the one who did it. Who else would know better? Bible says, by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin. Did God make a world with death and suffering? Like evolution says, they leave God out, but they say the world's always had death and suffering. The strongest survive. The lion eats the baby zebra and loves it. The baby zebra don't love it, but the lion loves it. That's not what God made. God made a perfect world, and man has wrecked it. It's our sin that destroyed it. The Bible says sin brought death into the world. That's what the expert said. I believe that. Bible says by man came death. In Adam all die. The reason there's death and suffering on this planet is because of man's sin. God's going to fix it one day. Bible says nothing died until man sinned. I believe that. In the 10 Commandments, God wrote on a rock with his finger, in 6 days, the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is. You don't need any experts to help you understand that, I hope. It says he made everything in 6 days. He said it again in Exodus 31. It's a sign between me and the children of Israel. In 6 days, the Lord made heaven and earth. It's not a parable. It doesn't need to be interpreted. He said it a bunch of times. In 6 days, in 6 days, in 6 days. I mean, it couldn't. And the Bible says Adam was the first man. You don't need any help interpreting that. I believe that. Do you believe that? Adam called his wife's name Eve because she was the mother of all living. Do you think she's the mother of all the living people on the planet? The Spirit said in the last days, in the latter times, some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to experts. That's what you've done, Jonathan. You gave up the truth and swallowed a lie. If there's a fly in the water, pick the fly out. The rest of the water might be fine. If there's science has got something wrong, and this is what the science is supposed to do. They're all been doing something one way, and somebody says, hey, why don't we build an internal combustion engine instead of hook a horse on the front? Oh, good idea. But if it'd gone by peer review, everybody would say, oh, no, you only got to have a horse on the front of your wagon. No, it won't work any other way. That's what peer reviewed would have done, would have kept us in a horse and buggy. I like new ideas. I think all the experts used to teach, hey, the Bible's true. Teach it in schools. Pray in school, kids. I prayed in school when I was in public school as a kid. What happened? The experts change all the time. You can't go by that. I'm sorry that you fell for that, and I'm sorry they caused you to doubt your faith, but Jesus was right. The creation of Adam was the beginning. Nothing died till Adam sinned. You add up the dates that are right there in Genesis 5. Get one of my charts here. Bible says Adam lived to be 900 years old, 930. I believe that. There's a lot of evidence that man used to live a lot longer. And before the flood came, the people are living to be in the 900s. After the flood, it dropped off to 400, 200, 100. That's what the Bible says. I believe that. And so I think Jesus, the expert who did it, said Adam and Eve was the beginning. Nothing died till he sinned. Expert said God wrote on a rock with his finger, in 6 days, I made heaven and earth. I believe that. I think the Bible says in 2 Peter, at the end of time, scoffers would be ignorant of the creation and the flood. The flood, the shuffling up of the continents and the moving around of all that water, that's what made all those layers. You can put mud in a jar and put water and shake it up, and it'll settle into layers in 30 seconds. The flood made those layers, not millions of years. They're all the same age. All over the world, petrified trees are found standing up, connecting those layers. How on earth can you get a petrified tree connecting all the layers if they're different ages? Dead trees only stand around, 4 or 5 years, not millions. Watch my video number 4, Lies in the Textbooks, where I cover holes and show the pictures of the polystrata fossils. I don't have them ready here tonight, but Anyway, thank you so much. We need questions from the audience now. But Jonathan, I'd like to see you get back serving the right Lord and reading the right Bible and get back to being a Calvary Chapel. Well, if you keep reading your Bible, you can be a Baptist pastor. Then you get it to the top. But Calvary Chapel is pretty good. Okay, they're close.
All right, I appreciate the concluding statement, Kent, and also Jonathan. You guys made for a fantastic debate, very entertaining, engaging, and we've had a great chat the entire time. So over 230 people enjoying this epic debate. And let's get into some questions. Let's get into some audience questions. And as we always do on this channel, we've got a nice mix of questions for both Jonathan and Dr. Dino. Whoever the question is for, let's give them the last word in order that we can move along smoothly. Okay, so I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning and just go in order. Just go in order for the most part, unless there's some questions here that are not really relevant to the topic. So this first one comes in from Chris Peacock, and the question is for Dr. Dino. So he asks, if everyone was vegetarian before the flood, why was Abel a shepherd?
Who's that for?
It looks like it's for you, Kent. Everyone was a vegetarian before the flood.
Well, the Bible clearly teaches in Genesis chapter 1 that everything was vegetarian. That God gave them the plants and fruit and vegetables to eat. It wasn't until after the flood, Genesis 9, when animals became afraid of man and meat began. And God said to Noah, it's okay to eat meat, but don't eat the blood. Okay, that was in Genesis chapter 9. But there's a lot of reasons to raise sheep. You raise sheep for milk. You raise sheep for their wool to make clothes and make tents and make practical things out of them. Doesn't mean you have to eat them. So I guess I don't understand the dilemma the person's having there.
All right, I appreciate the response there, Kent. Jonathan, did you have anything to add, or did you want to move on to your question?
I would like to add something pretty quickly. I just read a really nice article. It was the best article I've ever heard on that Cain and Abel story, and it's on radicaldiscipleship.net. There's some of my friends that do this thing, and it's this beautiful thing about how Abel is like a shepherd, and and Cain is the other thing, right? And Abel represents the poor and the shepherds that are on the fringes of town, and Cain represents the city dwellers and the empire and things like this. And you know, there's great quotes in this about, let's see, yeah. I'm more than ever of the opinion that a decent human existence is possible today only on the fringes of society, where they run the risk of starving or being stoned to death. In these circumstances, a sense of humor is a great help. That's a bad quote from this article, but it's just kind of the point of, like, there's really awesome radical interpretations of these things other than the literal ones. And I want to take the most radical interpretation possible.
Thank you for the response, Jonathan. Kent, question was for you. You get the last word.
No, you can go on to the next one.
Okay, I appreciate it. So this one comes in from Cover to Cover Book Reviews. This one's for you, Jonathan. He asks, since you don't understand the so-called science of evolution, would you say it is your religious belief?
I saw this one come through the chat, and I don't know what to say. This kind of conversation that we like to have on these debates about whose beliefs are religious or whatever, I don't know what to say. I mean, I would gladly take the title of just like, I blindly follow the experts, because I think we all do. And if you want to call that religious, I mean, that's fine, but I don't think it's completely accurate. But all of us blindly accept the experts on everything else. And it's the flat earthers that don't accept them on that one thing. And then it's the young earthers that don't accept them on the other thing. So that seems to be inconsistent. So that's why I just blindly follow them, because I don't think there's another choice other than me making something up, but I'm very liable to be wrong. So if that's religious, then I'll take it.
All right. I appreciate that response there, Jonathan. Dr. Hovind, anything you wanted to add to that one?
Well, yes, science means knowledge. What do we know? That comes from the Latin word "seer," to know. What do we know? We know cows produce cows. We know that. We can see it happen. We do not know cows are related to mosquitoes. We don't know that. You may believe that if you want. So I love science. I'm not against it. It's a fact. There are layers to the earth. Everybody can see them. Sedimentary layers laid down by water. I agree. There are two interpretations of that. One of them is wrong. Maybe both are wrong, but certainly one's wrong. Evolutionists, though, want to erase that line and make their interpretation part of the fact. And evolution is not science. Evolution should not be included in science. It's the fly in the water that needs to be picked out so kids can drink the pure water.
All right, I appreciate the response. Kent, Jonathan, question was for you. You get the last word.
Again, with this, like, you know, things don't, we never see evolution or like ducks produce whatever. It seems to be the same thing as, like, of course that makes sense on an intuition, but the same thing with, I don't feel like I'm moving 1,000 miles an hour. I don't feel like the Earth is going around the universe a bazillion miles an hour. I don't feel like we're a spinning ball flowing through a vacuum of space. You know, just because it doesn't make sense intuitionally doesn't mean that the scientists are wrong or it's some big conspiracy. It just means it's complicated and that, you know, things are more hard to understand than we'd like to think.
Okay, thank you for both your responses on that one. So this one comes in from Jackson Rowe, your best buddy here, Kent. So he has a question for you, and he says, I got it up on screen. He says, so there's nowhere the Cambrian, Ordovician, Silurian, etc. exist anywhere on planet Earth.
Absolutely correct, Jackson. You are getting it. You're finally understanding. There's no such thing as a Cambrian era or Jurassic or Triassic or Mississippian, Devonian, Silurian. It doesn't exist anywhere on Earth except in the textbooks. This guy said in the Scopes monkey trial back in 1920s, the lowest layers are obviously the oldest. No, they're not. If the older layers are at the bottom and the top layer is younger, where did it come from? Outer space? The whole geologic column is a lie. It doesn't exist anywhere. It's all made up. You got taught, you spent a bunch of time and energy learning a bunch of hard names, and it's useless information. Go ahead.
Thank you, Kent. And over to you, Jonathan, for your response.
If, like, okay, old Seattle, new Seattle. If the scientists said we've dated old Seattle this date and new Seattle this date, Kent would be very happy to accept that. We've dated old Jerusalem this date and new Jerusalem this date. But then when they take those same methods and apply it to the different layers, then all of a sudden we have a problem. I just don't understand. I feel like they know what they're doing, and I'm not prepared to challenge the scientists on their methods because I accept them everywhere else.
All right, Kent, you get the final word. It was your question.
Jackson, if the top layer is younger, where did it come from? How can the layers be different ages? Explain that, Jackson. Next time we have a debate, I want to hear that answer. Go ahead.
All right, I appreciate it, Kent. Next question comes in the form of a super chat from Virum Argumentum. $20 super chat. I appreciate the support. This one's for you, Jonathan. So he asks, doesn't Word of the Wild know that the Flat Earth Society is not a religious group and that many of them are atheists and agnostics? And he ends his question by saying they even had a president, Daniel Shenton, who was an agnostic evolutionist. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's disturbing. It was disturbing to me that it still is. It should be disturbing to all of us listening that most of the young earthers are all theists, and they think that the earth is flat and it's in a dome because Genesis says this. And I mean, I don't know. Is it a religious group? Well, of course. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if that even matters, but most of them are theists. If you listen to any debate with the flat earther, they're pretty much all theists, and they agree with everything that pretty much that Mr. Hovind says and other young earthers. But I think that if you just gotta, take another step and understand the methods that they're using, the epistemology that they're using to overthrow gravity and all the other sciences, you might see similarities with a young Earth epistemology. They seem to me to be the exact same thing.
All right. Thank you for the response. Dr. Hovind, anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, I think two fleas might be arguing on top of the dog. Do dogs really exist? Because they're just so little and he's so big, they can't understand it. And I think we're so tiny compared to the size of the earth, and it looks flat from time. But there's all kinds of ways to prove it's wrong. I don't want to get into that. I haven't tried to trap me in. I'm busy with the creation evolution topic. That's all I can handle. I think the flat earth is dumb. It's not true. Okay, the earth is a ball, it's round. And I love science, and I'd be glad to explain it to you if you'd like. But I think the whole thing is dumb, and I think evolution is just as dumb. It doesn't happen. They believe it. It's a religion. They believe dogs and mosquitoes have a common ancestor. I would bet Jackson Rowe believes he's related to a mosquito. I think Professor Dave does. I think that you're welcome to believe that. My point is, it's not science. It's not science. So it ought to be excluded. Pick the fly out of the water. It's not. It doesn't belong there. I'm not against science. I'm against flies in my water. I'm against lies in my science textbook. That's all.
I appreciate it, Kent. And Jonathan, quick final word.
I mean, again, like Kent and I would both team up against the flat earth, but the same arguments that Kent and I would use against a flat earther would be the same arguments that I would use against young earth. They seem to be the same thing. And I just think it's, Kent says it's not science. The flat earthers don't think it's science either. And if they came to you or to you, Donnie, and said, gravity isn't science, you would think that it is. And the same reasons that you would give why gravity is science is the same reason why evolution is science.
All right, I appreciate it. Next question comes in from SpongeBob Imagination, and he's got a question for you, Jonathan. He asks, do you accept the resurrection of Jesus, even though experts say that resurrections are impossible?
I'm just forced to, just for the sake of consistency. And I mean, the whole like, Jesus seminar thing. I mean, they've got really good ways of going about this. I mean, maybe the resurrection means something else. It means something bigger. It means something like, Jesus is the way of Jesus will continue on and affect in the world, and it's alive through us. I mean, that sounds like really lame and stuff, but I just don't. I feel like I'm just completely at odds with the experts, and I've just got to submit blindly to them, just like we all do in every other thing. So I'm not going to venture out and pretend to be an expert in something that I'm not. I feel like it'd be inconsistent.
All right, thank you for the response, and over to you, Dr. Dino, if you had anything you wanted to add.
Well, my understanding is that X is a has-been and a spurt is a drip under pressure. I think if that's what you're following, you're mistaken. So, Jonathan, if I understand your response, you do not believe Jesus rose from the dead. Is that your response?
Well, again, I would probably take like the kind of the cop-out way and say yes, but not in a literal way, in some other way, and some expert could probably explain what that means, right? I just don't know what to say. So yes, but also not in the same way you would think, probably. I know it's lame, but what do you want me to do? I'm lost here.
All right, guys, you guys are keeping this fun. So we still got over 250 people in the chat, but time is flying by. I want to respect the time of the debaters for tonight. So we're going to start winding it down with maybe one or two final questions here. We had a ton of questions come in. So this one comes in from World Tanks. He says, at Standing for Truth, question for Jonathan. How exactly do the layers, in brackets, he puts the geological column, form? What happens that there comes a new layer?
It's really confusing. Okay, I get it, and I've thought the same thing that Kent says. Like, aren't they all the same age? And if I shuffle a card, they're all the same age. But again, like, it's kind of like we just got to think really big. Like, I saw this video a while ago about like these layers of chalk that we find. We're all like creatures at some point. Like, they're called like chalkophores or something. I don't get it. But there's a bazillion million of them that were alive for 1,000 trillion years, and they all fell down to the ocean over a bazillion years and died and created this layer. Or like there was a vast ocean that where Europe is now, and there was creatures that lived there for 1 trillion years, and they all died, and their bodies went to the bottom, and then plants grew and went to the bottom and formed this layer that it's like gasoline now, or natural gas, or whatever it is now. I mean, these are how things form, right? Just like the cities. Okay, you build a city, it gets ruined, you build one on top. You bring in stuff from other places and you build it on top. I get that it's like the same age or whatever, like back in time, but they're built at different times, just like the cities. I mean, that's as far as I know, but you know, take it for what it is.
Thank you, Jonathan. Over to you, Dr. Dino, for your response.
If I took a jar of water, like my picture here, or a jar of out of our gravel pit, I live in the middle of a gravel pit, okay? Gravel, sand, clay. Stick it in a jar, add water, shake it up. It always settles out. Gravel, sand, clay. Jonathan, is the top layer younger?
No, I agree with you. I mean, it in that situation, yeah, they're the same age or whatever, right? But I mean, I think again, your analogy is the same wrong as if I dump water on a basketball. How would you explain that to a flat earther? You would say you're wrong because of this and this and this and this, and the experts say this and this and this and this, right? I mean, there are some places in the geologic column or whatever you want to call it where they were formed by floods, and I think the experts can tell the difference between ones that are formed by floods and ones that weren't. Right? Like a city, New Jerusalem, Old Seattle, New Seattle, were not formed by a flood. They were formed by over long periods of time. And the experts can tell the difference. The end.
Okay.
All right. Let's, I got one last question here. And I apologize if we could not get to your questions, guys. But as I said, time flies by and we're almost at the 2-hour mark here. It's been a fantastic debate. So this is the last question we are going to get to, and it's a question for both. So we'll get both of your inputs on this one. And it comes in from Jesus is Coming. He says, Standing for Truth, question for both. For the debaters, did God make food for us or evolution? Or I guess did evolution also make food? Which is more likely to be the cause? Whoever wants to start. We can start with you, Jonathan, if you want.
I'm confused by that question. Did God make food for us or evolution? I mean, I would like to think yes. I think that God is the author of evolution, so I think they can both be true. It's like, did Dad make food or did the grocery store? I mean, I bought the food. I think I can have my cake and eat it too. I think I can compromise with that a little bit.
All right, I appreciate the response, Jonathan. Over to you, Ken.
I think God made an amazing system where the brown cow can eat the green grass and give the white milk, and I can drink it and get the blonde hair, because all the same molecules have to be recycled through everything. It's just stunning. The digestive system, the growth of all the plants, how we all use the oxygen and the carbon dioxide. Animals breathe in, use up some of the oxygen. When they breathe it out, the plants breathe it in, and they use up some of the CO2 and put more oxygen back in. We reciprocate the gases back and forth. I think that's an amazing design. I don't have any problem saying, what a mighty God I serve. I don't have a problem looking at the human body saying, wow, God, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. I'm not going to give credit to evolution for any of that. Evolution is stupid. It didn't happen. There's no evidence for it. God made it. I give him the glory.
All right. We got a response from the both of you on that one. I appreciate it. And that wraps things up. I mean, there's the debate. There's the Q&A. Yeah, you know what? This is fun. We could do this all night, I'm sure. But we got to end it somewhere. Jonathan and Kent, thank you for making a fun, entertaining, and engaging debate. We still got 250 people in the chat, and we got an after show on Logical Plausible Probables channel. It sounds like it's going to kick off right after this debate ends. But as we always do, guys, I want to thank you both for giving us your time for this awesome debate. And let's have some final thoughts, final words before we shut it down. Jonathan, let's start with you. This is your first time on the platform. Again, thank you so much. And yeah, final thoughts, final words.
Thanks again. I really appreciate it. I appreciate Kent coming on. I'm glad to see him in good health. I just think that it's just completely inconsistent. And if you, I just can't get it out of my head. Like the young earth thing is the same as the flat earth thing. The same epistemology, same analogies, same tactics, right? And Kent would disagree with them, but then kind of special pick his own things and think they're a little bit different. But to me, they're the same. I don't know what to tell you. And then bonus thing, I think that kind of epistemology, looking at that kind of theology, looking at the Bible is worse. It doesn't have that like sting, like it doesn't have that fiery polemic that I've been reading from other people. It has massive implications for the world. And we need to get that out there. It has environmental implications. It has governmental implications. It has political implications. It has implications for all of our lives. And to make it this literal thing is a shrinking. It's a diminishing of the power of the God's scriptures. And I think we need to think bigger. We need to let the experts do other things. They can be the experts of science. We can be the experts of justice and mercy and getting out there and speaking truth to power and doing the Jesus thing in the world, feeding the poor, sticking it to the man, punching up, not punching down. You know, that's what the Bible should be about. It shouldn't be about taking it all literally. That seems to be a diminishing and doing violence to it, and it just doesn't. It doesn't do it for me. The end.
Okay, well, thank you for those final words and final thoughts. And again, Jonathan, thanks for doing this debate. Dr. Dino, over to you. Final thoughts, final words, and thank you for doing this as well.
Well, thank you for having me. The Bible says it's appointed unto man once to die. You believe that, Jonathan? I'm sure you do. You're going to die one day. Then what? After this, the judgment, the Bible says. 2 Peter tells us God's not willing that any should perish. He wants everybody to come to heaven. Go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. That's what Jesus told us to do. I always ask people in my seminar, what on earth are you doing for heaven's sake? Are you feeding the poor, Jonathan, with your money, or you want everybody else to be forced to feed them with their money? That's the Democrat way. Yeah, they get these grandiose ideas. We all ought to do this, and you got to pay for it. No, go do it yourself, okay? I feed the poor. I work hard. Anyway, so God says in the beginning, he created everything. We must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ. Whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have eternal life. I accepted that offer 53 years ago, gave my heart to the Lord February 9th, 1969. It became my Savior. Whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. I got it. I'm going to heaven. God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. This is what it says. You don't need to make up an interpretation over that one. He that believeth on him is not condemned. God is not willing that any should perish. Whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. I believe that. That's much more important than feeding the poor. If you feed the poor and they die and go to hell, I don't think that's as important as sharing the gospel with them like you used to do, Jonathan. I think he said, what must I do to be saved? Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and thou shalt be saved. I want to dedicate my life to spreading the truth. God made the world. He did it in 6 days. He came and died for us on the cross. He resurrected, literally, bodily resurrected. I believe that. And he's alive forevermore today. So that's my take on it. I think everybody ought to get saved. If you want to talk to me, 855-BIG-DINO, extension 3. I take calls all day long. I shut it off when I go to sleep. So if I don't answer, tough. Call tomorrow. 855-BIG-DINO. We'll get to you. Come visit our Dinosaur Adventure Land in Lenox, Alabama. It's free. It's amazing. You're going to love it. How do you guys like the Science Center today? Yeah, that's cool, huh? All right. Jonathan, come on down. We'll give you a tour, get you converted, okay?
All right, guys. Thank you so much, Dr. Dino and Jonathan, for those final words and final thoughts. I appreciate it. Dr. Dino, we're going to let you get some sleep. And before I forget, after show on Logical, Plausible, Probables channel, he puts a comment here and a super chat, so I appreciate it. So, guys, head on over there. And again, fantastic debate. I'm going to let the debaters get out of here and do our closing music, and then I'm going to come back just for 2 minutes, just myself, and go over some of the epic debates we have over the next month. So everybody, blessings. Thank you for tuning in. Thanks again, Kent and Jonathan, and Standing for Truth is out. All right, guys, that concludes another fantastic debate. I believe that is our 148th debate. So 2 more debates. We're going to be at 150. And that was a really fun debate. I want to thank Kent and Jonathan, both of them, for making for a really engaging debate. And guys, I want to remind you also that John Maddox is having an after show immediately following this debate. And whoever wants to join. It's going to be an epic open mic. I'll be joining for sure after I get some food and maybe a refill of a coffee. Genesis girl, I appreciate that. So we've had a ton of great results, I guess you could say, ever since we put out this debate challenge from Team SFT and Dr. Ken Hovind. We got a ton of debates on creation evolution in the future coming up for you guys. So I wanted to go over a couple of those, plus some of our other debates on other topics. Any evolutionists or anybody out there that wants a debate, that wants to take up the challenge, email me. truthishate17@gmail.com. You can find all the contact information in over on my website, standingfortruthministries.com. So we are going to be back here next week for the big rematch. David Neff, Dr. Dino, what's the best evidence for evolution? If you have not yet seen their first debate on this channel, please check it out, because that was definitely one to remember. Jackson Rowe and myself, we are going to be debating the question of ancestry. More specifically, is all life related through common ancestry? That's next week, next Monday on the 7th. And then on the 10th, the Cambrian explosion, best explained by creation or evolution. Professor McQueen and Jackson Rowe are going to be debating that important topic. So guys, if you're in the chat and you're not yet subscribed, but you love debates and you're a debate addict as much as myself, make sure that you hit that subscribe button. Also hit the bell so you get the notifications for these epic debates coming up. We've also got some solid debates on the nature of God coming up for you. Kelly Powers and Otis Lewis next week, Trinity versus Oneness. That's going to be an epic debate. Kelly Powers was just on here a couple weeks ago debating Bishop Jerry Hayes on oneness theology versus Trinity, the Trinity. So if you haven't seen that, please check that out. At the end of the month, we've got two great debaters here, well-studied individuals. The total inability debate, Dr. Leighton Flowers and CJ Cox. So that is a debate I am pumped for. Also, Tom Jump and Dr. Ken Hovind. That's going to be at the end of March, I believe it is. In March, we have some epic debates as well. We've got Ken Hovind and Mark Drysdale. The big rematch between them on evolution. Tom Jump and Kent Hovind, as you can see here, is evolution, a reasonable scientific theory. We've also got Kent Hovind and James W., who are going to be debating the question and topic of evolution. And also Jason Torn, he is going to be debating Professor David McQueen. So I am in the midst of setting even more debates for you guys. The Great Age of the Earth debate, Professor David McQueen versus Snake Was Right. Taylor, he's been on here a number of times. And of course, Professor McQueen is our team geologist. So that's going to be a fun debate as well. And that's not all, guys. Just make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you're up to date on all the upcoming shows. Of course, we've got a ton of interviews coming up. We've got interviews with Michael J. Ord, who's going to be back here. I believe it's on the 21st. We've got more lectures and presentations from the creation research team coming up. So just make sure you're up to date on the upcoming live stream section. Also, we're working on a number of projects. For example, we've got a film coming out that Matt and I are doing, debunking Dawkins. So that should be, that's going to be definitely one to remember. And so if you want to support us, help us, keep running full time, check our website. You can also become a patron. We're also working on a couple more books for you guys. One specifically debunking human evolution. And on that topic, actually, Luca Medugno and myself will be debating the topic of human evolution. We don't exactly have a date set, but we will have one soon, and I'll set that event for everybody. At the end of March, we got the big main event, justification debate, sola fide. Does the Bible teach salvation is by faith alone? Also, within the next week or two, the website should be fully updated. So I've got a lot of updates that I am handing over to the website designer, our team website designer. So he's going to have the website all updated with all the new content that we've put out over the last 2 months, I believe, since we've given it a really good update. So just answering more challenges. We've had so many more debates, interviews, and discussions and lectures. So we're going to have that all updated for you guys. So please share around this content because the truth is important. All right, guys, we'll see you over on Logical, Plausible, Probables channel. His after shows are always an after show to remember. So everybody, Standing for Truth is out again. And God bless you all. Thank you for tuning in tonight.